Hello. All right. I am live for my 7 o'clock clinical medical health clinical. I'm not drunk or high, but man, that sounded like it. Clinical mental health counseling talk, where we're talking about mental health from a guy who knows something about mental health. I'm just kidding. Well, I do know some things about mental health, but we are here to answer your questions. So the first and foremost, which I got to remember to do this, for anonymous, how do you spell anonymous? Anonymous. Text 772 303 3034. We haven't had a lot of people needing it, but yes, thank you. I'm glad my faithful assistant is here. Steve is the name we give our anonymous person, who, if you text the number, that any questions you might have, if you don't want anyone to know that it's you, that's going to be, I'm going to pin it so people all have access to that message throughout the time that we're chatting here together. But yes, you can just chat. I mean, like, look, we're a pretty safe community here. Obviously, this is going on the internet, and no one's ever regretted sharing anything on the internet before. But I don't call people out of like who people are as a rule as much as I can because of that. To try to be sensitive to confidentiality as much as we can be, given the fact that we're in a public forum. If you want to be super careful and have as little people know what you're saying as possible, you can text that number that's pinned in the chat, and my assistant will let me know. Steve has a question, and we'll all know it's not really Steve. There's Ripley in the background. Hi, Ripley. Yes, we all see you. We love you. You are the star of the show. Are you going to come settle down, or are you just going to make a guest appearance? Leave your public waiting for the hike that we'll hopefully have soon. There, yep, they're right there. Yep. She's even looking at you guys. Hey, guys, thanks for the like, she's saying, for the 2 people that liked the video. The liking the video does help the algorithm, and we do appreciate it. Okay, so basically what I do is I respond to anything that is chat questions as a first priority. And in lieu of a chat thing, I basically, yep, she's looking very beautiful. That's my girl, Ripley. Thank you. Yep, she's such a pretty girl. She's my permakitten. But anyway, I will talk about general mental health stuff. And I actually have my alpha male shirt, which I think I've talked about this once before. So again, stop me by chatting questions in the chat. But I'm going to talk a little bit about masculinity and femininity until we get chat questions. And also, you can again, to be clear, you can ask questions in the chat about anything even vaguely around mental health. And I will set that as a priority. It doesn't have to be about what we're chatting about. But Jung has a very interesting perspective on masculinity and femininity. One of the things that, and I'm going to maybe get a little political here in some ways, okay? Not too, if you guys know me, I never say anything controversial. But when it comes to masculinity, femininity, there's a lot of people that have different opinions on stuff. One of the terms that recently is said a lot is that gender is a social construct. And there is an element of truth to that. So here's an example. Scottish people wear kilts, and it's not considered feminine. But if you wore a very similar attire in a culture that was more familiar with our modern day culture in America here, you're wearing a skirt, and it's going to consider be feminine. So on a very basic level, we have a blue playground and a pink playground. The pink playground is where the girls play. The blue playground is where the boys play. In our society, weirdly, there's a societal shift where there's been a larger pink playground than a blue playground. Okay, so this is just, and again, how we express our femininity or masculinity socially in terms of the norm, right, in our society. It used to be the opposite. So women could not wear pants without it being something that was seen as controversial. Now, men most of the time can't wear dresses without it seeing something as controversial. So we've had a little bit of a shift. Women are more free to express themselves, even in a traditionally masculine way. But just because we say that the masculinity and femininity are social constructs doesn't mean that there's not an underlining chemistry element of masculinity and femininity. It doesn't mean that it's so broad that it can just be applied indiscriminately, that masculinity and femininity have no definition. So music is a good example. All right. I often make jokes about the fact that country music isn't really music. I'm really have my own personal grub with country music causing migraines for me because of the tinge of the twang. Now, by the way, in country music, when there's no vocal twang, I don't actually have a problem with it. Bluegrass is instrumental, and there will be instrumental twang. So guitars can go this bend of the guitar string, but it always resolves. So it's tension and resolution. All that to say, in terms of music theory, there's 12 notes traditionally, 7 different notes in a key, and different cultures like Indian will play at this a little bit. Middle Eastern, right? They tweak it a little bit, but it's not that different. So music tastes have relativism, but there's an absolute. There's going to be rhythm. There's going to be harmony. There's going to be melody, right? There's going to be all of these key elements that make something music. So something can be relative or have variety and still have absolute principles underneath it. If you shoot someone full of testosterone, you're going to get predictable behavior. There's going to be an increase in aggression. There's going to be an increase in physical strength as well as adrenaline. There's going to be probably more risky behaviors, okay? For better or worse, healthy or unhealthy, this is masculinity in its chemical form. And similarly, estrogen. You give somebody estrogen pills, right? You shoot them full of estrogen. You're going to have more emotional behavior. Like there's going to be more tears. Jung describes enema and animus as the masculine side or the feminine side of a person. So in other words, I as a man have a feminine side, and that would be my enema. Okay, I'm pretty sure I'm remembering them right, but I didn't look this up before the thing. Animus would be the feminine side of, or the masculine side of a woman. It could be the exact opposite example, but double check me. Just don't check me on ChatGPT. Okay, Google it is better than ChatGPT still. All right, and ChatGPT would probably get that one right. The point being in this is looking at, this is my alpha male thing, right? That as a person, if I'm a man, right, I still can get in touch with my feminine side. That is a healthy thing. And it's healthy to be comfortable in feminine energy. And as a woman, to be comfortable in masculine energy when it is appropriate. None of us are strictly feminine or strictly masculine. We play different roles at different times in society, right? And being comfortable with that gives us so much freedom, but just being aware and honest about the fact that we're in that. So as a therapist, I'm one of the few men in the field. It's a minority thing. In my program at my master's degree, there were maybe 95% women and 5% men, because this is an emotional field. So men often have a harder time getting in touch with their emotions. Women generally have it be socially, yes, more easy for them to do it. And also having more estrogen, they are going to be more predisposed for that. Feel free to ask questions about this stuff too. Anyway, Steve's wondering the best way to respond when someone has an embarrassing problem when trying to perform. Are we specifically talking about trying to perform sexually or trying to perform music? Because it really depends on what you're saying, how I go with this question. I will say if it's just in general of an embarrassing problem when trying to perform, I'm going to think it's probably sexual. But please try to clarify to me what that is. One thing that, let's just talk around it vaguely in case it could be either one that could apply to both until I get the more specifics. So when it comes to embarrassment, when we have a safe individual, right? And what does a safe individual require? A safe individual requires a response of not judgment, and that they're not going to later use it against you, whether in an argument or in a joking way, passive aggressively, whatever. One of the things that I have had seen as partners in couples counseling is people that share intimate secrets of their relationship or their feelings, insecurities, and then later that is used against them. And that is cancer to emotional intimacy in a relationship. You really have to have certain things, could be completely off guard. You can be somebody who loves to joke about stuff, like I love to joke about stuff, but you have to be able to communicate the taboos that are off limits and not to be joked with. And one of the ways that you can communicate that, if you have a mature partner, is by looking in the eyes, changing your tone from normal, and literally stating that you're doing this. I want you to see that I'm looking you in the eyes. I want you to see that my tone has changed. I want you to know that I'm talking to you very seriously. I'm talking to you calmly, but very seriously, because this is something that is really important. This needs to be understood as something that can't be joked about. It's for you to be a safe person and me to share with you this part of my struggle of feeling embarrassed about whatever. I need to know that I can trust you to not joke about this, not later use it against me, and not make this into an issue. Unfortunately, it's often the case that we don't have a partner who is safe on that thing. And honestly, I would say, I'm going to controversially say, find a safe community. Don't feel that you have to share everything with everyone. And whether it's your family or your romantic partner, if they're not safe for you to share things with, don't share it. Like, you don't have to share everything with everyone. And there are people that have healthy relationships that there are certain things that they have to go to other people to talk about. I have a lot of things that I just don't bring up with certain people. And it's not really for the issue we're talking about now, but it's just because I know that the way that person handles those topics is detrimental to our relationship. I know that usually, so I'll just share what I'm talking about. I have certain friends that have made up their opinion on a certain topic and kind of are sick of hearing me talk about it. So they're very judgmental and harsh and blatant on going back to that thing that their recommendation of what they think I should do that I'm not going to do, at least at this point. And it makes that topic something that is a no-go for those people because they're not willing to listen. They're not willing to hear me. They don't have empathy. They're just going to bluntly say what they want and they think. And it's like, okay, well then you're not the person for me to share on this topic. If you have no one to share, you need to get someone. And honestly, that is what brought me to therapy. What brought me to therapy is I had some things in my life that I didn't feel like there was anyone that was really safe for me to talk to without any risk of them breaking confidentiality or consequences. And I will say I am a huge proponent. So I'm not only a therapist, but I am a pastor. And I'm a huge proponent in having a safe space. So back in the day, there's a thing called clergy privilege that's still a thing. But back in the day, it was a bigger deal with confessionals. And the idea that, which is still legally the case, everyone's a mandatory reporter when it comes to a crime where someone's going to do serious and foreseeable harm to someone else. Ongoingly or in the future, right? So this is not necessarily past tense things, but everyone is a mandatory reporter except for a lawyer and his client and a pastor in confessional. And it's actually the opposite in that it is against the law, technically, for a lawyer to disclose what the client has shared with them. And it is against the law for a priest or pastor, even actually technically an elder, in what was reasonable to believe was a confessional, to share that with the authorities. And I actually got in a big argument with a bunch of priests over this because they were all trying to figure out ways that they could get around clergy privilege so that they could report people to the authorities, because they didn't want to. And this is my opinion on their perspective. This is not their perspective. This is my opinion on the emotional root of their perspective. Okay. But in my opinion, they don't want to have to carry the burden of knowing harm is being done and not be able to directly manipulate, control, whatever, affect the outcome for the best reasons, right? They want to protect people. And I get that. But the reality is I believe everyone needs a safe space where they can confess, share anything, no matter how taboo it is, without any fear of consequences, without any fear of humiliation, without any fear of it affecting others. And if you can't do that anywhere else, you can and should be able to do that in therapy. So, and by the way, a therapist, just while we're on the topic, is a mandatory reporter when it comes to those things. So that's one caveat for confidentiality with a therapist. A priest or pastor is not if it's in the state of a confession. But my point is just saying you can go to your therapist and share about stuff that's embarrassing and you struggling with, and know that it's never going to get out and they're not going to judge you and they're not going to make fun of you, and it's a safe place. And then you can start talking about it. And gosh, I had this one client that had something that they struggle with as a shame in a way, and I think they still do in some ways, but it limits their freedom and relationship possibilities in their life. And what I try to do for that client is give them exercises to start slowly, basically exposure therapy techniques, safely and with ways that only produce moderate anxiety, start to share about that topic. So we broke it down even into point systems to like have it be where they can more and more feel comfortable, and it becomes less and less of an embarrassing problem, whatever it is, right? So having a safe person is the first thing. And then finding ways to start talking about it in a broader context to where it becomes less and less an issue and you have more freedom. Acceptance and commitment therapy, we talk about psychological flexibility. So the idea is that we want our life to be bigger, not smaller. And our natural responses to embarrassment, pain, betrayal, abuse is often to make our world smaller. And look, I'm not saying that that's never okay as a coping strategy when we have to, but ultimately we want to create a bigger world because our goal is not to just be safe. Our goal is to be happy. And human beings are happiest when they have a full, vibrant, rich life of purpose and meaning. So, a lot of times when people have gone through a lot of embarrassment, betrayal, hurt from others, their natural inclination, it's a negative feedback loop you see again and again, is to make their world smaller and smaller, thinking I'm being more selective of the people that I'm trusting. But we're actually making our safety net smaller and smaller till it could not possibly carry our weight. And you see this in codependence a lot. So like a codependent will have one person often or a few that they are overly attached to and completely reliant on. And then it becomes a negative feedback loop because those people often are going to feel like they're too much. They're end up putting too much of a burden on those individuals, and then they feel more betrayed and more hurt because they're let down of the person not being there for them in the way that they want the person to be. But no healthy person would be, because we are built as people to need not only to be self-responsible and interdependent, but to have a community of people that we all can rely on. If you've got, and look, like when we're kids, we can't really control our community very much. We can pick some of our friends, but we have a very limited capacity to. When we become adults, it becomes harder to meet people in some ways, less socially normed to go out and look for friends in certain contexts, especially devoid of hobbies. But we have far more freedom to shape our community and culture the way that we want to. And I think we should intentionally do so. I've shared often about having guy friends that I like to work out with that I, for a long time, didn't, because I hated locker room talk. I hated crap talking. And you know what I mean when I say crap talking. I mean the other word. And guys would just do it, and it was culturally norm. Talking about masculinity, femininity, one of the things with masculinity and the social norms of masculinity is that it's like almost like the way that we love each other. Gamers are big on that, and athletes are big on that, which is kind of funny. But the big on the whole like, oh, that's all you can do. Oh, and I have a friend that posts stuff online, and he's got a lot of people that are from that side of that community. He tolerates it. He doesn't really seem to be super affected by it, but I get annoyed on behalf of him, because it's like, dude, that's not okay. The worst is for me, my little hotspot is when I have somebody who is in Christian ministry who does that. I had somebody was posting some workout video, and somebody was like crap talking. I think it was in a private message, at least, if I remember correctly. Like, it wasn't like a comment, which would have been worse, but they were like just talking crap. And it's like, I was pretty tough on them. I set the boundary very firm. They never commented on any of my videos ever again, and I'm okay with that. Because I was like, yeah, this is totally inappropriate. And, it's, I went through the whole, I think I quoted the whole poem from, it is not the critic that counts, not the man who says how the doer could have done his deeds better. It is the man in the arena whose face is marred with blood and sweat. And I don't remember the whole thing, by the way. I don't have it memorized, but it's like, even in defeat, his face will never be marred with those cold and timid souls that know neither victory nor defeat. Because I think our society is overly in that hater group of that sitting on the back sidelines and thinking it's okay to insult the man in the arena. But anyway, all that to say, to Steve, who's wondering the best way to respond when someone has an embarrassing problem when trying to perform is that, we want to be somebody who always encourages performance, always encourages in the attempt, whatever that attempt is. So, positive conditioning, one of the most powerful methods of therapy, is basically we celebrate steps in the right direction. And, I think about dog training or cat training even is more accurate, that when I'm teaching Ripley a new trick, I am at first giving her rewards for even just getting slightly closer to the trick that I'm trying to get her to perform. And then over time, you can have it be a higher and higher bar. And when she's not, cooperating or whatever, which with cats, you have to be a lot more patient because they choose. They're not super dependent on your affirmation. They don't need your approval. So they have to be interested and in the mood. And that's okay, because it's great practice for people, because people are not dogs. Most people, they constantly need your approval. They are more like cats, and they need they need patience and consent. They need to know that they have agency in it. So, getting back to masculinity and femininity, because I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat right now. And it's like we all get to choose, and we're all comfortable with different things. Thank God we have freedom in this country to display and live the way that we like. Oh, I'm hearing from somebody, chat won't let them ask a question. You can text that number that I have pinned in there if you can't ask a question for whatever reason in the chat. And also, if you have my number, feel free to text me as well. I try to always keep that open, so I can, if I'm multitasking, that's partly what's going on. Okay. So please do text me, text the number. Okay, chat is working for some people and not for others. I don't know why. Like, one person I had that was pretty regular with this live stream could never make comments. For some reason, they just got blocked, and I tried to look at the settings, and I didn't have any block on them. So I don't know. I'm not that aware of the YouTube format. Do you think date nights are an important structure in a relationship? I think connection on a regular basis is really important in a relationship. And for a lot of people, having some kind of a rhythm really helps. I tend to, most of the time, need to do something every day. There are some things that I do like once a week or every, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday kind of thing like that. But typically I find that I'm more consistent if I do things daily. One of my favorite metaphors for a relationship is about the fire and keeping that fire going, and how it needs oxygen, it needs space, right? Can't have too much oxygen or it won't produce heat. Can't have too little or it won't produce heat, ironically, right? So you can stifle a relationship, and people have anxious attachment often do, right? People that are nervous, if I don't try enough, they'll leave me, and they just stifle the relationship and it can't breathe because it's too much, not enough oxygen. Avoidance, opposite problem. Typically, they give way too much space in it. And then every once in a while, you need to add another log in the fire. you can't expect that even if you start from a place of great affection in a relationship, you can keep going forever without adding more to the fire. So one of the things that is nice about the rhythm of a date night once a week is that you have a regular check-in to kind of go, hey, uh, this is a time period where we are going to make sure we're adding enough logs to the fire. I also think it's a great idea to have like a monthly, at least, conversation to just check in that isn't a date night. So it's not an event. It's not trying to spark anything. It's just trying to analyze and process. Hey, let me check in. How have you been doing? Are you happy and healthy? Here are some things that I wanted to talk to you about, but I couldn't find a time. Those would be great rhythms to have. You might go, you know what? I wasn't even thinking about this, but now that we're talking about this, it would be helpful. And in that conversation, I would try to have it not be overwhelming with, by the way, it has to, if you have way too many topics to talk about once a month, it means you should be doing this more frequently. But not be overly negative, but just be like, hey, here are the things that are going well in our relationship, and here are the ways that I think we could do even better. That's a great positive feedback way to deal with issues and not have them come about as accusations and problems. So date night, I'm for it in general. I think it's a fine general rule, but I think it's a one size fits most approach that many relationships don't need, especially if their daily drivers are good. So my mom and dad, as an example, wake up every morning, and they, opposed to most people who don't wake up every morning. No, I'm just kidding. They wake up every morning and they do a prayer where they have a special time that's usually just the two of them, reading their Bible, singing songs, and praying for their loved ones and each other. And they work out together. And they do that every morning. And that alone is a lot. I don't think they do date nights. It wouldn't be a bad thing for them to add in. I think their date night rhythm would probably be different than most people, because I don't think they would love to like go to the movie every week, but they hike together like 2 times a week, go to the gym together 3 times a week. It's like their lives are date lives, essentially, right? For some people, though, that would be like, yeah, but that's just our rhythm. We need something special, right? Some people need some kind of a special event. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You just got to figure out. Well, here's one thing that I'll say. When it comes to appetite, there are people that eat like birds, and they have like a little plate, and they just like peck on it, and then that's it, and they're fine. And there are other people that they want like a lot of food. You can't have them just kind of meet in the middle. You have to have the person who wants a lot of food to be able to have a lot of food, and the person that wants to eat like a bird to be able to eat like a bird, right? And so in a relationship, you have to kind of find a way to make sure each person's needs are met. And so if there's one person that doesn't like celebrating, and there are other person that really does want to celebrate and make a big deal about special events and holidays and different things like that, you got to find a way that both people are. It doesn't mean that like one person has to do both, right? But it does mean that you have to find a way that both people are fed. So the person that doesn't like celebrating might have to celebrate a little bit more. And the person like celebrating, or the person that doesn't like, I don't know if I said that right. The person that doesn't like celebrating might have to celebrate more than they like. And the person that really likes celebrating might have to celebrate sometimes alone and not always with their partner. Right, so that partner doesn't have to contribute to everything. I won't say who, but I have a partner or a friend that I know. I'll just say that he's really extroverted. She's really shy and introverted, and he's done a really good job of kind of like letting her come to some things and not come to others. He can still have a vibrant social life, and she can have a smaller friends group, and they can make it both work. But often that means he's going to go out alone. Not all the time, but some of the time. Okay, explain, please, an emotionally well-balanced male/female, masculine/feminine. Emotionally balanced, accepts strengths and gentleness. All right. So I'm not sure if you want me to explain it from the perspective of what I think is a well-balanced man or a well-balanced female, right? But the difference between those two is going to be essentially what is dominant, right? So, and I'll be honest, like for me, I consider myself a very feminine man, but I have very masculine traits as well. Both at the time, yeah. So this is a weird example, but I'm reading through the Audible books or listening through the Audible books of Harry Potter. And there's the Gryffindor and Hufflepuff, and I'm starting to know these things more and more, and Slytherin, and then, well, what's the other one? Oh man, now I can't remember the other one. But the one that's Hermione is a very big studier. So you would think that she'd be in the one that's very academic, but she's not. She's in Gryffindor, which is the one that's courageous. And you can see it more and more. Ravenclaw. Somebody said race law, but I got where you're going. Yeah, Ravenclaw. She looks like she would be in Ravenclaw, but she's not. She's in Gryffindor. Why? Because even though she often displays herself in a academic way, and she's very into studying, when it comes down to it, the decision and will and purpose, the drive, the core of her being is more about courage, and it's why she's willing to break laws and rules all the time for the greater good. That's not a Ravenclaw trait. That's a Gryffindor trait. Okay? So in the same way, when it comes to, masculinity and femininity, I'm going to just use myself as an example. This might sound confident or cocky or whatever, but when it comes down to the core of my being, I do think that it is masculine, right? So it comes down to the core of my being. I think healthy masculinity is in some ways the role of the protector, the role of the provider, the role of the one who looks out for others at risk to themselves sometimes, takes the initiative, leads. Like this is the ideal of masculinity, and as it's reflected in different situations, it can look very different. It doesn't have to look like Macho Man Randy Savage here. Okay, there's the alpha male, right? And then it's got the cat and the butterfly and the right. So my dad, I think, is a healthy depiction of this. He was a dancer and a wrestler, bodybuilder, dips, like gym teacher, like let's go do some push-ups, kid, but then cried at Hallmark commercials. And he was never afraid to show us his feminine side. He was never afraid to be sensitive, to be caring. But his primary role that he led in was leading our family. And the way that he led it was looking for what was the best for our family, not what he most wanted. So there was all these different things in our childhood that were developed on whether it was for mom or the boys. I had no sisters, unfortunately. We had to marry women to get them into our family. But sometimes it was for mom, sometimes it was for us boys, but it wasn't primarily for himself. Now, that doesn't mean he didn't have his own self-care boundaries. He said struggles with migraines, so he definitely had to take time for himself. Maybe took too long to figure out how much time he should take to himself and overextended himself sometimes. But yeah, so in terms of what I think healthy masculinity looks like for a man who is in touch with their feminine side, it is that the way they make decisions is based on their role. So he raised us with this book called The Raising of Modern Day Knights, and it was accept responsibility, lead courageously, reject passivity, and look for the greater reward long term or in heaven. This was a Christian book, right? But I think the principles apply to the heart of masculinity. Now, just as that doesn't mean I'm not going to, cry at a sensitive moment or feel in touch with my emotions or be willing to process emotional stuff. You could say, well, wait a second. Shouldn't a woman accept responsibility, lead courageously, reject passivity, and look for the greater reward? And I would go back to like the Hermione example. Yes, and to be clear, I mean, you can live however you want to live, right? But that isn't the core of it. So my mom, as an example of the core of femininity, is not, she's a quiet woman, right? So this might be the stereotype a little bit of masculine and femininity, but she's not a weak woman by any means. And people are often surprised when they get, like, when they first meet my parents. My dad looks, he's very extroverted and outgoing and talkative, and my mom is a little bit quieter. And so you don't necessarily know the hidden strength that she has. When I remember this one time, I had one of my youth, it wasn't my youth minister, but like youth volunteer assistant lady people come visit me at my house when I was injured. And she was so shocked to watch as my brother John Peter, this wasn't the shocking part, snuck behind my mom to get these donuts. And my mom, without looking behind her, has obviously eyes in the back of her head, as all women do, and says, "Don't you touch those donuts," right? And John Peter like laughs, hee, and then goes and grabs the donuts and just like starts shoving them in his mouth because he wants to be a jester, and he's doing it to show off for the youth volunteer. And my mom just she grabs her like slipper and just starts slapping him. I told you not to, And we just kept on talking like everything was normal because it wasn't a big deal to us. It was a normal event in our household. But my youth volunteer said that she imagined quiet, nice Debbie, my mom, as always submissive, always, doing what she's told kind of thing in our household, because we had these big, loud guys in the family. And so she was really surprised to see, oh no, yeah, she takes care of herself, right? But the heart, the core of my mom, it's always the quiet ones for sure, right? Is a caretaker, is somebody that is emotionally safe, is somebody that has empathy, is somebody that can accept responsibility, but flourishes most when she knows that dad is doing that, so she can afford to be sensitive, right? She can afford a healthy, relationship is one that sensitivity is such an advantage, especially when we don't have to survive. When we're in a survival state, it's the only time sensitivity is a liability. And we shouldn't ever stay in that long term. And so if we're stuck in that, we had to think about what do we have to do to put ourselves or realize we are in a safe place so that we can have the luxury of sensitivity, because it is a huge strength. You'll have so much respect for her. That had to come from somewhere. There's no way she didn't hold her own with all of you. Yeah, and one of the things that some of you guys have heard this me share it, but it's such a good example. My dad used to say every week we had talk about instead of our date nights, we had these like meals together around a table. It was called this weird custom in our family called dinner. And we would get together and we would talk It's this thing with you when you don't have a TV, and instead of the TV doing the talking, it's the people that do the talking. That's the idea. So it was like we converse over a table, it's a round thing, and we talk while we eat. And one of the things that my dad would say every week is he'd say different things, but one thing he always said is, "Debbie, you make our house into a home." And I would say that again, to me, right, a healthy woman who has a masculine side, right, is a woman that the core of her being is she makes people feel at home. And it doesn't have to be her family. It doesn't like you can be single. My Aunt Teresa, single her whole life. She makes people feel at home, right? She's independent. She had to be, but and she accepts responsibility. She leads courageously. She rejects passivity, and she definitely looks for the greater reward in heaven. She's got all the four cornerstones of being a man, right? But the heart of her being, and you would never meet her and be like, "That's a cool dude," right? You'd be like, "Yeah, that's a beautiful woman," right? Because the core of her being is making people feel at home. And then the attributes and flexibility of what that takes on. And that's the great part of being comfortable with the other side of you, is that you're able to function in whatever role is necessary, but you flourish in the role that is your dominant one, right? And again, I mean, I say this as a man who chose to be a therapist, and I did a funeral today. I love being there for people in their lowest moments, and I'm very comfortable with the emotions. So I feel like I have a very strong feminine side, and maybe far more than most men, even in the ideal, which is okay. Advice for being so hot that I'm melting. Exposure therapy is not working. Yeah, nice. That's funny. Um, yeah, getting in water is the best. And hydrating. I need to hydrate more. But whether you can jump in a pool or just splash yourself with cold water, heck, just bring everywhere you go, bring like a bucket with just some ice in it and just splash your face in it every once in a while. That'd be my advice to surviving Florida in the summer. Uh, Beautifully said. Thank you. I don't think she's talking about the ice part. I think she's talking back with the masculinity, femininity side. You guys choose to live here, Yeah, we know. True. Okay. Yeah. Florida right now, for those of you who are not in Florida, be thankful. But yeah, it's really hot here. Today was, I definitely felt the extra heat today, and it had this breeze, and you'd think, oh, breeze makes it nicer. It was just like an insult, because it's like you're getting slapped by hot air, is what it felt like. So, obviously toxic masculinity is going to show up as violence, taking all of these same strengths and using it for ourselves. And toxic femininity is going to be more like manipulation, typically. A woman can be in toxic masculinity, and a man can be in toxic femininity. So it's not like any of these things are things that the other sex is not capable of, right? I skipped a question. Okay, sorry. Oh, I know there's a correlation between mental and physical health. Do you think it's it's possible to be very well off in one category and bad in another? Well, relative. Some, just as I was talking about music and how our femininity and masculinity shows up, there is a relative flexibility, right, in variety, but it is not an absolute separation. So in other words, I don't think you can be actually physically super healthy and emotionally, that's probably the one that's most common, emotionally and spiritually and intellectually not healthy at all, or vice versa, right? For any of those things, I think that they kind of like drag each other up a little bit or down, dependingly, but especially down. But I do think you can have it be where you have really focused on and have a lack of balance of one and not the other, right? So you can be somebody who's really good at mastering physical health and have spent almost no time on your emotional health, and you will have very low emotional health even though you have high physical health. But for you to be physically healthy, there are some things that you have to have the ability to do emotionally, right? So you have to regulate. You have to have that looking for the greater reward long term. Um, you have to be able to resist temptation, and all of those do actually build emotional resilience. At the same time, and there are studies that show this, if what you look in the mirror when you see yourself is something that you find physically disgusting, it takes a huge hit to your mental health. So if you are only working on yourself emotionally and not working on yourself physically, and if I wrote a book, I've thought about this years before, if I wrote a book on whether it was financial health or physical health, it would be mostly about emotional regulation, because it's like, it's not that we don't know how we should be not buying everything on a credit card. It's just that we don't have the emotional regulation skills to resist when all of a sudden that shopping bug give me a little dopamine rush for a little happiness. I just want a little bit of happiness right now. Like, ooh, what's on Amazon? Santa Claus coming to my door tomorrow. What did I order? I don't remember. Opening the package. Yay, I feel happy. And then 5 minutes later, I don't feel happy anymore. And the credit card comes bill and it comes due, and I'm really not happy, right? Same thing. You might ice cream. It's like, I'm thinking about ice cream now, and now I'm thinking, maybe I'll have some ice cream at the end of this stream, right? Because it's tasty and it's good, and I'll feel good for that moment, right? So, life is about balance. And I think that, the hard part about today's society, and it's like, look, I don't actually care. I remember, confession, I was talking to ChatGPT about all of this, and it was trying to push me towards specialization on these categories, because that's how you actually like make money, get rewarded by society, right? Have you ever thought about that? You get more notice in society if you get extremely good at one of them, even to the detriment of the others. So like I'm just going to use him as an example. Sorry if you're I've talked about him before. I don't even know if I said his name before, but the guy who's like talk about, in my mind, toxic masculinity stereotype. He's not as toxic as some celebrities out there, but the you can't hurt me, carry the boats guy, who's all about ultra runs. And like in his book, when he couldn't run for a little while, he was about to have a mental breakdown because he's not emotionally healthy at all. He's not balanced. He's really good at one category. That's not what health looks like. But that is how our society tends to reward people. I think that the happiest people in life are not celebrities, surprisingly enough. The happiest people in life are the people that have balance. They balance their finances. They're not the most frugal. They're not the most rich. They're not the most spend hungry. They have balance. I think that it's fun to have a six-pack, but I'd be honest, I don't think that everyone would be happier if they had a six-pack. I think most people probably would not, because it just takes so much extra effort to get to a six-pack, right? Same with emotional strength and all of it. Like if we're balancing all of that as we're growing and building positive momentum, we tend to do better than going, I'm going to work on this. I'm going to get my, emotional health and I'll be the most emotionally healthy person ever. And then like put a detriment. I'm not even going to worry about myself physically. I try to find a way that I'm working on myself physically, emotionally, and spiritually. For me, I know I got mentally healthy before I was able to even think about getting physically healthy, but it's all a part of my overall well-being. Yeah. And like for a lot of people, especially the people that struggle with like morbid, not morbid, what's it called? Is it morbid obesity? Is that what it's called? Anyway, the people that really struggle with their weight, usually the primary is an emotional thing, right? There's something, and therapy would be very helpful for a lot of these people who are struggling with this, to talk that through with the therapist, because until they get mentally healthy, they're going to have it be really difficult, because it's like almost an artificial change that requires a lot of attention and effort, and willpower is overrated. It shows up different for each person. So one of the things is, like, you can have an addiction to food, even though that's not part of the DSM-5. And addiction has sometimes a surprising emotional root. It's not always obvious why we are pulled to the things that we are pulled to. And when we come through and heal the inner person, we often have less of a dependency on that thing that we once were. So like one of my friends got in shape and had men start to give her positive attention, and she felt super uncomfortable. And so she started putting back on the weight. She had some trauma in her past that if she had gotten healed from, she wouldn't have run into that roadblock. So that's just like one example of like where the connections of physical and emotional are not always on the surface. As Pascal says, one of my favorite quotes, the heart has reason that reason doesn't know. If there's something that seems unreasonable in the moment, there's probably something in the past that makes it make perfect sense in our lives. So that's been my experience in therapy, that once I know a client's story, their worst behaviors and the things that they do that seem the worst to them make perfect sense. And when we can reparent, help, heal, they have freedom. Now they still have to walk into those new habits, because it requires building new muscles and skills to do things differently. But now they can, because they don't have the emotional anchors that are drawing them back into their old habits, if that makes sense. All right, that's about it time. So thank you guys so much for those who text the questions and chatted us up. I do appreciate your questions. It really makes the hour go better for me. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for those who liked our videos. We are going to try. I'm going to try to meet next Sunday, 7 o'clock Eastern time. And hopefully I answered all your questions. If not, tune in next week, and you can feel free to text that number, 772-303-3034. All right. Love y'all. Have a great week.